Today, we're going to talk about how to fix Achilles tendonitis. And you'll notice that a good portion, I'd say 75% of the conversations that we'll talk about is in some way linked to the context and the principles around rehabilitation that go ahead of the actual stuff. So we're not going to jump in, like do this cue, this cue, this cue, because so much of the experience of pain and rehabilitation and what that offers us is a chance to really connect with the body. So what we want to think about is that if we miss that just because we say, oh, my foot hurts, what do I do? We lose out on the opportunity to actually learn from the experience and prevent it from happening again, so to speak. So we're going to talk about Achilles tendonitis. There are no pictures in this, and I apologize for that, but we'll continue to work through that. So we will cover some questions and answers at the end, so you can throw them in the chat if they pop up along the way. And also just remember that I don't know if it automatically meets you when you join, but just be mindful of that so we go through. All right, so the plan. So first, we're going to talk about what's happening. Second, we're talking about the foot and the calf, how they're related. Third, we're going to talk about the big picture, which is context. And then we're going to cover the 3 pillars of rehabilitation: fascia, muscle, and plyometrics, or skilled movement. I have to figure out what I want to call this one, but then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So the Achilles tendon is the biggest tendon in the body, which means that it's responsible for handling a lot of leverage when the forefoot hits the ground. One thing that's cool is if you look at animals, the way they're structured, your dog, your cat, well, not all animals, but most legged mammals and birds, what's actually on the ground are their toes. So, if you imagine us, we have I don't know if it shows my video on this, but we have our foot, little foot model. Our toes are on the ground and our heels on the ground. The space between the plantar fascia is actually what you see lifted off the ground. So when you see a dog and their shoulders and hips are kind of turned different directions, but their toes are on the ground, their heel is that first bone that points back. So that long space out there is their plantar fascia. And then their Achilles tendon is like from the heel up to their knee, which is kind of backwards, or it's something along those lines. So, or maybe it's the other way. There's digitorum and plantar grade, or digitigrade, plantar grade, unguligrade. There's like the 3 different types. If you're hooved, if you have toes on the ground, if your feet are on the ground. We're plantar-grade individuals, our heels are on the ground. So humans sacrificed a lot to be with our heel, to have our heel on the ground, to drop down. So we lost the springing explosion. So you can think about leverage. Obviously, if you're lighter weight and you have a longer leverage, basically Archimedes said, give me a lever long enough, I'll move the world. If we have a longer lever, then we can move more explosively. So we lost a lot of explosiveness, power, agility. We're not fast animals. We're fast. Usain Bolt's fast, but compared to a cheetah, it's like standard. The average cheetah, so to speak, is like is fat. Like the average cheetah, for example, is like miles faster than the fastest human. So it's just something to consider. But we gained a lot to do that. We can use thumbs. We have a level of a. Just be mindful of muting. There you go. I'll fix that next time. All right. So we obviously sacrificed a lot when our heels dropped to the ground, explosiveness and dynamic capacity, but we gained a lot. We can use our fingers, we can use our hands, we can do so much with that. And so what you notice is the divergence of the length of fingers versus the length of toes. And so this happens little by little as we stop grabbing things with our hands or our feet and we start using them dynamically. Instead, we start to use them as balance. And so there's a trade-off of that. And so the thing to remember is that just because the heel is on the ground does not mean that its original function or the original function of the Achilles is different. It still has to handle a lot of force, which one thing that anytime the forefoot is on the ground, the Achilles is working with the foot and ankle and lower leg to stabilize as a unit. So that was good because we would be able to use our feet. We developed billions of foot ground contacts when we were barefoot and moving, but then we started wearing shoes, and that threw off things because what happened is we, instead of just naturally working through the day and getting a small remodeling sensation as our toe moved a little bit and we dealt with the posture of just being off and having to just strengthen and to get the stretch and the bend, we stopped getting all of that and we became locked in as one thing. Our calves became sticks, our foot became flippers, and became one joint that kind of bent at the ankle. And so we lost the ability to move and articulate our feet as individual bones. And so we lost the billions of foot ground contacts that would have shaped and strengthened that. And so that was one piece, because you also have to remember that we also made chairs and couches. And so this meant we lost the ground sitting. So when you look at the changes of the body in relation to the stimuli you provide it, at first, when you are moving and you're always on the ground, your feet are getting the stimulus that we need to be stiff. We're jumping, we're running, we're climbing, we're pushing, we're doing all the stuff. We have to have stiffness and strength in the foot. And so without something to stretch and remodel that, you would become a steel rod. Basically, you're really stiff. You become extensions of bones. But because we were on the ground, if you look at any picture of ancestral tribes or like native tribes, or I don't know, pre-modernity tribes, you see them in a very close relationship with the ground. You see them, kneeling and squatting and just kind of climbing along and doing a lot of rotation. They're just on the ground. And so that level of bending at the ankle and knee and the toes keeps them supple and healthy. So that combination back and forth kept us both strong and supple. And that was a very valuable thing. So the thing you have to remember is that when you to address the Achilles tendon, it doesn't exist in isolation. So unfortunately, modern science, modern rehabilitation, modern perspective on the body tends to think of things in the perspective of a cadaver. So once you're dead, your blood's been drained, your fat's been scraped off, your skin's been peeled away, your fascia's been removed, it kind of looks at it like, okay, this is a tendon, this is a bone, this is a muscle. And they kind of try to back in the body in this thing. But no muscle, no ligament, no bone exists in isolation. Well, you could make an argument for potentially bones, but they're suspended as, ossified pieces of tissue that just create leverage. So, a bone without a connecting system has no real movement capacity. So what you want to think about is the problem is, one of the issues is that when we think about Achilles tendonitis and the Achilles tendon, we kind of make the mistake of thinking, oh, I have Achilles tendonitis because I have an Achilles tendon and I have an ACL and I have a femur and I have, a fourth metatarsal, I guess it's fourth metatarsal. So like we have these individual things, but all of this tissue, especially the soft tissue, exists as links. And so if you can imagine the muscles that exist in these fascial encasement, so there's like a pocket of muscle that exists in a fascial encasement that then connects to another pocket of muscle and another fascial encasement, and that connects to another one. So these chains that run up the body. And so we look at something like the Achilles tendon, you cannot think of it as separate from the calves that go above it or the plantar fascia specifically. Like when it comes to the plantar fascia, and this foot model holding does you kind of demonstrates it. When you look at the heel, what happens is this Achilles tendon and the plantar fascia are the same tissue. They wrap around the heel, and technically the Achilles tendon is wrapped in something called the Achilles peritendon, which is just another layer of fascia that wraps around it. And so this tissue, you could think about it as like stretch wrap, maybe the best way to think about it. You kind of pull it down, you stretch it around the ankle or around the heel. But it's not just like, obviously there are attachments at the bone at the heel, but it's not like it's just that attachment. It literally like fascia, for example, is there's a fuzz to it, there's a stickiness to it. So when it layers down, there's a charge to it that it kind of gravitates to bones. And so when you have this tissue that kind of hardens in this line, this connective tissue that wraps around tendons, you like pull it around the bone and it starts to glue on. Like if you were to think about it like a piece of duct tape and you pulled it down, it would start to create this connections. And so over time, the movements, well, people don't think about like bone spurs, which is probably another seminar topic, but when you think about bone spurs, it's like bone spurs happen because that tissue is being pulled away, and the tissue has lost its ability to be pliable and kind of stretch, so it just starts to pull like a rope on an anchor, and that anchor starts to pull again. But everything in your body is a constantly remodeling set of tissue to stimuli. So when we look at the Achilles tendon, you cannot think of it as separate from the plantar fascia. It's just if you took the Achilles tendon and stretched it and wrapped it around and hooked it at where the feet are, it's just more points of contact, because this whole thing, if you lifted your heel off the ground and had to like balance, you would realize that, okay, my Achilles tendon is wrapped around and it started to connect underneath. It is all one set of tissue, and it's all like all of the tissue is just tissue, and it's all connected. And it's all like the more different connections it can have, it's like social networks in a sense you go through. The more people the more ways you're connected, the better, because it makes you more firm. So it's much better to have an Achilles tendon that's wrapped in and connected to the heel at a bunch of different points that then wraps around to the plantar fascia that connects on the underside of the heel, all the metatarsals, all the bones of the tarsals and the toes. And then, that goes up and it connects along the tibia and the fibula and the knee, because that creates a structure. But you can't have it be, so this is another part, you can't, because you can't think of the Achilles as separate from the calves. The problem is that if it was all just stuck in one piece, you wouldn't be able to glide and have articulating movement. So what you end up in is, like the movement is the stimulus that keeps everything gliding and sliding. And so the fascia, and again, this is another, we need to do a seminar on this itself, because fascia is it's so integral to understanding the human body, is that the layers of fascia slide and glide along. And so where there is movement, there needs to be a stimulus. It is a self-hydrating tissue or self-hydrating fluid called hyaluronic acid. Where there is movement, it's a stimulus and a force to get the body to start to, pump in some of this hyaluronic acid and make it smooth. It picks up the fuzz. And so, again, we'll talk about a visual for this in a little bit, but, the movement of the foot, ankle, lower leg in response to the stimuli you provide for it is what tells it where, what tissues need to be stuck and what tissues need to be, what do you call it, when you're separate from, I don't know what tissues need to be separate, individualized from other tissues. And so with this, you have to understand that if you have the muscles, and I think I thought about this today for the first time in my life, which is pretty interesting to think about, but muscles are like the only way we can connect to the body. So like even when I move my hand and I talk, it's all muscular engagement, and I can't even control all the muscles. And though, we think about it, it's like breathing. Well, that's a muscle, diaphragms and intercostals that are expanding and pulling. And so, heart rate, heart's a muscle. Your digestion, to the degree that we can contract and control, there's sphincters that we can contract and squeeze. And so what you realize is that there is your ability to connect with your body is directly related to your muscles. And so if I have poor connection to my muscles, I lose the ability for my tissue to push and pull and distinguish itself. So it's not true to say that, people get caught up on like the specific semantics of what you say, but a weak muscle becomes stiff. Yep, that's a generalization, but I think it's not hard to imagine that if I don't have a good connection to a muscle, I can't get the nuanced differentiation, that's the word I was looking for, of muscle engagement to push and pull specific tissues. For example, you can look at your hand and you can move your fingers. Now, if you look at your forearm and you look at the muscles, well, I'm wearing a sweatshirt, but if you look at the muscles that are engaging when I flex and the tendons underneath, well, obviously the better what do you call that, connection I have to my fingers, the more nuanced my connection to my forearm is going to be. So the climbers, for example, have very strong tendons, but because they're using so many different finger positions, they're getting a lot of nuanced differentiation between those tissues up the chain. So it's no different with your feet and your calves. And your Achilles literally become the calves. They are the connective tissue that flow and they blossom in. So it's not like you have an Achilles that starts and stops. You have an Achilles that at one point is all connective tissue, and that slowly begins to intertwine with vascularized tissue, meaning there's blood flow. And so then you get some of the contractile elements of the muscle, and they start to a little bit at a time. This thing doesn't show it because it makes it look like it's all white and then it's all red. But in general, you can see some of these things, this like muscle belly down here, if you could see, and actually the side of it, you can just start to see that it's like there's this blend where it's kind of Achilles, it's kind of muscle. It's all threaded in there. It's all threaded and very strong. So, that becomes the muscle. So if the muscle can't contract and push and pull, the Achilles doesn't get the push and pull that keeps it healthy. Let's see. Oh, how do I? Yeah. All right. When we don't move, we get stiff as fascia hardens. So a great analogy for this is if snow is falling on a city. If you're on the main roads that's paved and cars are still driving on it, you get enough traction that it melts the snow that falls. And so Gil Headley, who's a brilliant guy, he's an anatomist. He cuts people open and looks at them, which is pretty cool. But he talks about it called the fuzz, basically, which is like in the body kind of exists like this gel, so to speak. There's more of like a fluid gel, but there's like the static fuzz. I'm going to do some more research into it, but I'm pretty sure there's got to be some type of an electrical charge to that, because everything in the body works with like physics and chemistry, which chemistry is just physics. Maybe it's chemistry, physics is just chemistry. Who knows? But just the gradation of like the differences of those things, it's pretty cool. But it's like what layers it down, what pulls these things, and there's like an electrical charge that controls the whole thing. But the point is that the body, in a sense, works like this. So the main roads are our fascial lines. And so if I want to think about throwing, for example, if you throw with your right hand all the time and if you try to throw with your left hand, you realize, man, this feels really weird. My shoulder doesn't want to rotate. My chest doesn't want to pull apart. Our body forms along this. And so the lines that we use and move constantly stay healthy and supple because snow is falling and the car is driving on the main road. But if it's like a back road or a parking lot that's not getting a lot of traffic, the snow builds up and it layers down and layers down and layers down. Eventually, it hardens and freezes over. Same thing happens with your tissue. If we didn't move, we would start to stiffen and ossify. And little by little, these special cells called fibroblasts that lay down fascia, they continue to make what is a stiffening. So it's basically a dynamic thing where your body, and just think about this for a second, it's really cool. Every single, I don't know if you've seen any of those like special effects where people like have snapshots of a movement, and so they're walking along a path, and it's like there's a picture that kind of like exists of each frame, so to speak, and they kind of like slowly walk and step in, like catch the different frames. But if you haven't ever seen that, then that's not going to be helpful. The point is, every single position you're in, your body is layering down for that. So if you're sitting in a chair, your body is layering fascia to shape you into a cast of that moment. Look, if I'm sitting here for more than a few seconds, my body starts to shape to that. If I move, my body starts to, the fuzz starts to get moved away. So every single, I don't know if a second is appropriate, but maybe you think of a minute or the average hour. Probably every single minute of your day is a vote for a position or a lack of position, meaning I'm moving and I'm mobile and I'm opening up. So your body is constantly trying to shape you to a cast, like a little exo or a little endoskeleton of what you're in. So if you're constantly moving, guess what? You become a more fluid, mobile thing just by the fact that you're not giving your body this like, oh, this is my one thing. But you are giving it feedback that like bones, like femurs, the tissue around your IT band, for example, unless your femur breaks, your IT band will not get any motion. So that is one where people sit there and roll their IT band, and it's so silly because that thing should not be stretching or moving. You want it to be tight. And so we start to look at these tissues. It's like we want tissues that are not moving to be stiff. We want tissues that should move to be flexible. The problem is when we can't get those two together. Because if we didn't move, this wouldn't be a problem. You just turn the bone, and that's why some areas are good. But since most people that have gotten in this situation have worked themselves into it because they want to keep running, jumping, hiking, playing sports, doing this stuff, something has to absorb the force. And that means that instead of using our connective, elastic, pliable tissue, we start to use passive tissue. So you think about the fact that you're without good connection to your muscle, your calves, your muscles, your feet, and your calves, they start to stiffen and sort of ossify. That means that the connective tissue is not getting the push and pull it needs. That means it turns into stick and your feet turn into flippers. And that means you're not moving well. So, what you end up is when those tissues start to stiffen, they can no longer stretch and pull like a healthy rubber band. But something still has to absorb the force. And so the shoes can only do so much, but something is still going to stretch and pull. And what that means is if it can't bend, it starts to break. And if it can't stretch, it starts to tear. And so the problem is we tend to ignore these small pains and we muffle the symptoms with orthotics, stiffer shoes, braces, icing pills, and the quick fix treatment. So this is shockwave therapy and Graston strat, all these things. It's like, in shots, injections and stuff like what do you call that? Like steroid, cortisone stuff. All of those quick fix treatments that someone does for you will not work. It will not work. It's just it may help a little bit, and there is a psychology of getting out of pain, maybe lets you move a little bit better. I'm not saying there isn't value at all, but it's not going to fix it. And the worst is if you continue to kick the can down the road, problem gets worse, and that's where you end up with like a sudden tear. Oh my gosh, you didn't see it coming, but I did. So, all right, so that's the first section. But basically, the idea is that everything is connected, and you have to start to remodel the tissue. If you don't get the movement, it starts to stiffen and become like bone, and that's not good. Now, before we get into the actual action steps to figure out, it's essential that you understand the big picture of rehabilitation. So a lot of this, my friend Keon gave me this book, and it's just blown my mind. The Inner Game of Tennis. The Inner Game of Tennis. It's the Inner Game of Tennis. If you get it, it's like 130 pages. It is so good. So good. I can't even describe how good this book is, but it really basically, and I should actually do a premise on it, or a seminar on it. But the premise is that the body is divided into. He divides the body into self one and self two. Self one is the ego that thinks up here. It's the identity that we associate with. It's the thing that is probably having. Some people apparently don't have an internal dialogue, but if you did, that's the internal dialogue. It's kind of like talking. And it's the mind in a sense, which if you can think to a certain extent that the mind, in so much that the mind exists as separate from the body, it's that thing that kind of runs away. It's a mind of its own, so to speak. And so that is separate and distinct from the body, which is us. The thing that's beating your heart right now, that's consciously moving, that's handling all the problems of your life, that actually goes through, that digests food, that knows how to act when you're in the middle of a game and you're playing and your body starts to do certain things. That's you. That is the essence of in the brain. It registers as an area that associates with me for statements like me hungry, me shared, like those kind of things. Like that's you. Me is you in a sense. Me is me. I is kind of a different part. I and me register different parts of the brain. So I am happy. I am angry. I want to go run a race. Notice that that's ego talking. It's all the egoistic aspect. It's not a bad thing per se, because you just have to learn to put it in its place per se. Because me, the body, is what we're talking to. And so everything in the body is directed by feel, visualization, observation, and feel. The body does not learn through technical cues and specific rules and critiques and corrections. It learns by feeling things. It learns by watching things. For example, infants do not understand complex language, and yet they learn to stand, crawl, walk, run, giggle, laugh, talk, all on their own without words or instructions. That should be the first reminder that we all experience that before we can even think and have internal thoughts, we're just a thing that exists with intelligence that's inherited. And so we're observing. So the most important part of the rehabilitation process is that you learn that, I think next slide, yes, pain is a signal of a mind-body disconnect. And injury is evidence of that disconnect. If you are in pain, and pain, this is something I thought a lot about, and the closest I've come to a definition is that pain is a distracting force. You have traction on something. I want to look at that blue wall because that blue wall is pretty. Oh, ow, what is that? Notice how I got distracted? I lost my traction. That is pain. It could be a happy thing. Like, what, that tickled? Stop it. Like it could be a happy noise or sensation, whatever it is. It could be a frustration and anxiety, something that takes us out of the moment and into the conceptual space. Now, injury is evidence of that disconnect. You got hurt. It's like something you were not paying attention in that moment. Of course, you might think, well, sometimes things happen, like you may have just an acute injury, something exploded, like you got, I don't know, hit by a car, like, or whatever it is. So look, it's not, don't go into the nuance of like the victim blaming of like, it's not always your fault, but in general, when we're looking at soft tissue injuries and specifically chronic injuries and specifically chronic injuries that lead to acute injuries, there's a disconnect where you are not paying attention. You are thinking and you are not paying attention to what you're doing. Thought I had the other day is that you only choke when you start thinking about swallowing. Your body knows how to swallow. It knows everything. It is literally evolved for years and millions of years to swallow really well. Because if you couldn't swallow, you wouldn't digest food and you would die. So yeah, we got that down. But why do people choke? It's like we start thinking about it and they get in their head. It's like, again, there's so much that if you start to interfere with the action of your body because you are up here micromanaging it, that's where you get this disconnect. So again, what you want to understand is that anytime there's pain, it means there's an introduction for fear. Now, I don't necessarily mean that every pain scares you, because a lot of people learn like, oh, this is just pain. They become associated. They identify and own their pain. Oh, it's just my back. I got that bad back, all that herniated disc I had 10 years ago. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe, but you identified with that thing. And so that crack, just like mold creates like a small crack in a foundation create mold and decay, a crack of, oh, I felt that. I didn't want to feel that. I wasn't thinking about feeling that. I was focused on that blue wall I wanted to look at. But now something has distracted me and pulled me away from this experience. So that creates a little disconnect. And so to the degree that we don't associate that or aren't able to incorporate that and figure out what happened, then there is a hesitation that continues to build in the body. And so what that does is it gives our mind a justification. Say, oh, see, I told you I need to come in here and focus on that. We need to be very careful about how we move, because if you step too far backwards, we're going to be at risk, because we have that Achilles and you've got to watch out for that. So what you see is that becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy where our brain, the little dictator, wants to come in, our mind, or the little dictator wants to come in and say, I told you I need to control everything. And that creates a further and further disconnect where we're no longer trusting our body. And most people are so disconnected, and I speak from experience, they don't even realize they're disconnected. They can't even consider their consciousness as separate from their existence. Like the consciousness, the cognitive consciousness is only one aspect of consciousness. It's something I think about all the time now, but different topic. That doesn't mean concepts, technical instructions, or thinking is bad. Often it's a necessary first step to get our mind on board with the process. What's the next one? Yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. When you think yourself into a problem, you're not going to fix that by thinking more, but understanding the process and being able to undo some of the cognitive errors that have gotten you to that point is helpful to let go of them. For example, if you were told by a doctor or a podiatrist or a parent that, oh, your feet are really weak, they need to be protected, don't go outside without shoes, it's dangerous, you could get hurt, then that idea, that concept, that belief becomes true as you start to act it out. So it's not that that's true for you until you begin to act it out. And after years and years of wearing shoes, your feet do become weak and the world does become scary. So if that idea has derailed you, then new evidence, new conceptual perspectives can undo that idea. It can give you, meaning I have X amount of evidence that is leading me to this supposition. So if I can do minus X, that leads me to an opposite one, I can cancel it out. Now I've created my space for my body to move. Now, when it comes to movement, space is where our body thrives. And by space, I mean freedom to move without rules of engagement. Meaning, so let's say if you have shoulder pain and I raise up too high, it's like, oh, that hurt. I don't do that. So now I think the pain interrupts my body's movement. And so now I say, well, we don't do that. And you notice that I start to stiffen my shoulder and my trap. So when I raise up, I'm starting to do a whole level of protection around the joint. Same thing with Achilles. If I step and it's irritated, oh, that's bad. So then guess what? I need my stability shoes. So the body doesn't choose to wear shoes. The body doesn't choose to put orthotics on. The mind does. It says we need this because it's safe. And so what you start to see is that when we have pain or injuries, if it's acute, we do this, we go into, you can start to think of like a dictator going and say, well, we're at war. We need to go on the martial law. It's like injury is like a time where your brain just puts your body in martial law. We're going to get orthotics. We're going to put shoes on. We have to have a brace. We have to have anti-inflammatory. We're going to go home in ice. Like all this stuff. We put all these rules on our body and it becomes a lack of space. We constrain the options onto this tiny little thing. And that's fine at some point when you do have a scary situation and something's there. It's okay to put those rules on. But the problem is once you have that martial law, a dictator never wants to get rid of that. I mean, we know that from experience. Like maybe not experience, but like, history tells us that is like the dictator doesn't want to give up control. And so our mind doesn't want to give up control. Yet, unless it lets go and allows the space, meaning literally my foot can move because I'm not wearing shoes, space, that's the space between matter, the things and object that confine us. If you were in a room with no space, you'd be pretty claustrophobic, unless you're a cave diver, in which case you're crazy, and I don't even know why you're here. But the point is, space is what we do. So we set the rules that constrain our goal, and then we let our ancestral physical intelligence work. That's why sports are so beautiful and captivating. Like that's the cool thing about soccer is, you do need some rules, but the broader the rules are, the more space you have. So if you're going to play soccer, you have these are the out of bounds lines. If you didn't have out of bounds lines, there would be you couldn't really play the game. But you need space within that. And so, then you set rules that kind of create new variables and options because you can't punch the guy, but you can, slide tackle. And so that's a fun way to start to think about what the body can do. So you start to see is rules become just enough to constrain chaos, but space is where our body works. And that's the thing, but this space must be earned. So when we're in the early rehabilitation process of any injury, you have a lot of rules to constrain our options. That's how we restore confidence because the world has gone crazy. If you tear your Achilles, you can't stand, you can't move. The world has just completely shifted for you. What you thought you could trust, which was your body, is no longer there. That is a scary place to be. And so it is a place where we're going to put in rules and I'm going to reinstitute certainty and stability right away. But the problem is humans don't like that space. And so what they end up doing is, but the long-term goal of that rehabilitation is to become one with the body again. So when you start off with this martial law and you say, we're going to start off with this martial law so that we get back to freedom and democracy one day. It's like, well, how is that going to work? It's like, what are the action steps we're going to take to get there? Because right now, I just see more of the same. that's what you want to think about with your body, is that when you've gone into a situation where you have Achilles tendonitis and you have a set of like chronic things and you have a set of rules around it, are those rules empowering you to get back to being one with your body again, to have space, to trust the movement? And so, you know, that is where you can start to question certain things, like any stimulus. Okay, I'm going to go to the doctor. They're going to do shockwave therapy. Well, is that just going to magically fix it, or does that lead to a stronger you, or does that just alleviate the pain right now? It might alleviate the pain, and if you're doing that in combination with movement that strengthens you, okay, that's part of a rehabilitative plan. But in general, it's not, because most people rely on these external things. So you have to think the big picture of rehabilitation is get back and be healthy again. How are you going to do that if you don't have, the ability to trust your body? So, we can go on with this idea, like there's so much to this with space thing, but it's just understanding, does the goal you're working towards is the path you're going to get there support the goal you're working towards? So, and this is the hard part, because through what seems like good intentions, the mind will begin to play rehab games. So this is the idea of like, just 2 weeks, whatever it is, the thing that they tell you they're going to do, like, we're just going to go do this thing for a few weeks and we're going to all come back. And we're just going to wear this stuff to protect everybody and we're going to let it go. We're just going to, it's the rehab games. And you realize it's rehab games because it's all in numbers and concepts, in objective feedback, in like reps and sets. And you realize that whenever you're playing a game that feeds into something that satisfies the mind, it is not communicating with the body. Does that make sense? So, like, if I say you need to do 100 reps of this, okay, good. All you did in your head was count to 100. You didn't actually feel the muscle. You didn't actually connect with it. And you can't, the body doesn't work in right number. The concepts of numbers. Like, I was listening to a discussion, a podcast on language, and he was talking about some languages don't even have numbers. Like, they don't have a number for one. They don't have a word for one. They have a word for some, few, and many. And so, like, the point is not that that's an ideal way to be, but the point is that counting and numbers aren't inherent to our human ability to live. So the body doesn't communicate in numbers. It just communicates in this different conscious, like different, like, feel, intuition, hearing, sensation. Like, there are so many things that are there. So, the rehab games are things like, oh, we're going to work on this. We're going to measure your ankle dorsiflexion. We're going to get back to this point. We're going to measure how much force you can produce on the ground. We're going to measure how fast you can move. We're going to measure how far you can jump. We're going to measure until you do these sets and reps. And but the problem is, this constantly reinforces the thinking loop, because all you're thinking is, okay, how does it feel? How does this feel? How does it feel? And by how does this feel, you're thinking, is there pain? Is there pain? Is there pain? And so this is part of the thing where you get stuck in this loop, in a sense, where you are no longer connecting with, do I feel this thing? And then, okay, once I feel my muscle, can I stay with that? And I'm not necessarily, I'm verbalizing an internal talk, but it's not about the words. If you're thinking about the music you're listening to, you're not listening to the music. If you're thinking about the food you're tasting, you're not tasting the food. There's a distinction. If you're thinking about the way you're feeling, you're not feeling it. You just be there. And so the way you connect with this is through the breath. We'll talk about this when we come to the muscle part. But what you want to think about is the breath, which is just allowing the body to connect and move and involving the sensation, is one step. But the true process of getting back to space involves opening up more and more. Okay, last time I focused on this, I'm going to set a different set of rules. And so again, it's not that the mind is bad, but you have to constantly be open up the rules. Okay, last time I did some calf raises. Now I'm going to start to work on, I'm going to do single calf raises. I'm going to continue to work it stronger and go through that. So it's tough because every single step for this, I think the next one, rehab is a constant process of expansion. That means that it will always feel uniquely sticky, scary, and uncertain at every single point of the way. There is never a point where it will feel right to let go of your control over what your body is doing. That's because your mind has a very strong grip on the whole thing. And so as long as you understand that, and again, there's so much more I could talk about there, and I probably should have just kept this out of the process, but it's so essential that when you look at something like Achilles tendonitis, in any pain, any rehab, you have got to understand that the process feels difficult because you are having to let go of this mental grip on your body and trust your body again. But if you don't do that, you'll never heal. You'll never get over it. So it's a constant expansion, and it is always going to feel challenging. So those humps in the road are like, well, that was scary, but like you set up so it's scary, but that even if you got, you're willing to let go of something, because even if you got hurt, it would be, you can manage that. And so you can kind of move along that way. That's the process of healing. So all that said, let's talk about the 3 pillars of how to fix this thing. Pillar 1 is the connective tissue and fascia. So this is the fascia is the connective tissue that wraps around and supports everything in your body. If you didn't have skin, your body would still hold the same shape because you still have fascia that wraps around it. There's superficial, subcutaneous fascia. There's deep fascia, parietal fascia. There's fascia around your organs that hold your gut in place. There's fascia around your muscles and in between your muscles that holds the tissue. Your body is fascia, and it's just some segments that are vascularized or some segments that have specific organ functions. I mean, but like the fascia is everything. And so tendons you can think of them as a slightly specialized form of this. So with this pillar of focus on fascia, we're focused on restoring movement to tissue. That means we're going to work primarily with the vectors of pressure and stretch. So fascia works both in long, stretched out, very slow ranges of like slow movement, and also quick plyometric, rhythmic, repetitive motions. But that's something we'll come back to in the 3rd pillar. So we use pressure and stretch to get movement into tissue that's gotten stiff. When we don't move, we don't get the hyaluronic acid to remodel the tissue, and it gets stuck. So we can kind of back in that with things like massage. We use tools to get into stuffed tissues. This is kind of forcing the body to move. But you can't just massage and expect that to work. So I might get you can massage, like just imagine I'm pressing into, like, if you've ever seen a cactus where you kind of press in, some of the fluid comes out. I'm massaging and kind of getting some of that fluid to move. But if I don't connect that to an intentional set of motions where I'm turning you have to distinguish between my mind, which is I'm thinking about, oh, that hurts, oh, that hurts, oh, that hurts, and the actual connected awareness of how to integrate this to the body. And that second part happens in a way that you're not necessarily, you might notice the after effects of it, but you're not, you think, I press in and I feel, ooh, that hurts. Ooh, that hurts. That's what you think, that you're feeling the muscle. But there is something that's happened where you're touching this and you can say, all right, my body is connecting with this. But you don't, the only way you know that your body's connecting with it is because you have access to movement. And the movement happens and you start to be able to move without pain. Meaning there's movement that's integrated without sensation. For example, I don't know how to, I'm still searching for the words of this, but if you take your hand and you touch your finger and your thumb, your pinky and your thumb together, what are you thinking about to do that? You're not. You just have an intention of finger thumb touch together. You're not thinking about the muscles that work. You're not thinking about the tension. You're not thinking about all the different variations. You intend and it becomes so. So in the same way, when you let's just say you want to try something you can't do, let's imagine the pinky and thumb were stuck together or your ankle was stiff, you intend and you cannot do. And typically, you're going to notice the sensation that your body gives you. And from that sensation, you can then make a plan towards addressing that. Because the sensation will guide you to it. If it's pain or stiffness or pinching or tearing or snapping or cracking, all those things can give you different feedback on what might be a root cause. Ultimately, it's movement. Sometimes it's hydration, sometimes it's nutrition, sometimes it's recovery, sometimes it's injury. So there's other things that, like, there's not that many things that go into it. Our bodies are pretty self-sustaining, but if there's feedback, it means it's not integrated. And so part of it is saying, okay, I'm going to press in and massage this, but I'm not trying to think, oh, I'm going to do it till the pain goes away. You just have to do the thing with a faith that your body is connecting, integrating it. And I know that sounds so broad, but it is like learning to trust your body is learning to trust a thing. Okay, think about it this way too. When you're speaking the main language you're fluent in, you don't think about the words. You might have some dialogue in your head about what you want to say, but by the time you're speaking, the words are flowing through. So the internal conversation, the internal thought is not the thing that produces the word. Those two are separate. But it's challenging because you might think, what am I going to say? I'm going to tell them about the feet. And then I start telling you about the feet. But I'm not, as I speak, that has come from a different source of consciousness, a different source of awareness, a different source of intelligence in the body. But when I speak a different language, I have to go, how do I say feet? go to the bathroom, ir al baño, or puedo ir al baño. And so and so you start to see in his head, at least that's how it was for me, is you map out the words you're going to say, you map them to what you want, and then you reduce that. But once it's fluid, it just comes out. You dream in that language, so to speak. And so it is no different with the body. So the pressure and the stretch is a way of saying, this is here, and I'm pointing, I'm using my brain to map out a conceptual awareness of the body. And I'm going to use that to find pressure to bring a proprioceptive capacity to acknowledge what's there. I'm going to stimulate motion of the tissue, and then I'm going to incorporate that with stretched out positions. And that stretch is an intentional movement. This is why things like the stretch lab are just, I can't stand. I mean, it's not valuable, but anything to people that they stretch and they do it for you, it's such a waste, because if you're not empowered to trust yourself, you're not getting the benefit of it. So a little tangent there, but it's like, you have to be involved in the process. And so the stretching, well, so what this looks like, some type of massage or rolling. So it could be like a soft, foam roller or a tennis ball. And there's things you could play with, like very firm and very hard, massage. I think that if you get too hard, your body really tenses up. If like a kid, if you scream at a kid, they're not going to listen. If your dog, does something bad, you scream at them, they just they shut down. So like just like your body, treat your body like you would a kid or a dog, or an animal. It's like the extremes don't help. And so you do what, you find a spot, your feet, the bottom of your feet, your calves, you just roll through 1 to 5 minute stops. Again, you're not making change to the tissue with this. You're just getting a little bit of motion, because fascia pound for pound is stronger than steel. So you're not going to get in there remodel stuff. It's like you're not going to fix pressure points and trigger points and all this stuff. You're just going to bring awareness to that is there. Get some motion in there. Get some of this tissue moving. And it's very helpful. Sometimes having someone do it for you can be very valuable with a massage, but you must incorporate that with stretching. So with the stretching, that looks like full plantar surface and the foot and the calf. So something like a full splay plantar stretch where your toes are on the ground, you're really opening up your entire foot, the bottom of your foot. Or a great example is like if you're doing, if you put all your toes on the ground and then you drive your knee forward and then you try to sit back on your hip, now you're stretching out your foot, the entire foot, and your ankle as you're driving forward. You can also start to think about driving the knee forward with the heel off the ground, but the toes are on the ground, trying to work through that. So that's stretching out the plantar fascia, which is, again, inextricable from the Achilles tendon. And then with the Achilles tendon, you're going to elevate the front of the foot and straighten the back of the leg. That's going to lengthen through the back. But again, as we mentioned earlier with variation in calf raises, it's not like there's just one thing. If you straighten the leg fully, you're going to get all the way through the calf, the hamstring, and the glute. And so you can play around with arching the back to get a little bit more in there. But then also remember, if I load this and I stretch and I start bending the knee a little bit more and drive the knee forward, I'm going to get different variations of calf muscles. So, and then, you can turn the foot in, you can turn the foot out. There's a whole bunch of variations with this. But what I like to think about, last thing here is think about stretching like strength training. So move very slowly. I don't like passive stretches. I like things that have movement in them. So move, find movement, and then when you feel like you get into an in range of motion, just slow down and really ease into it, and then come back out and treat that like a rep. And so anywhere, like by rep, I just mean like an individual movement unit, and you come in and out. The numbers all made up, and the points aren't real, so it's 8 to 12 or 8 to 20, doesn't really matter. But spend a minute, massaging or working on an area, and then stretch, and then a minute massage working in the stretch, and then go back and forth, like 8 stretch reps and a minute massage, and just go back and forth like that. And you'll notice that this isn't necessarily, making muscular change. We'll talk about that in pillar 2, but what you want to think about is this is bringing awareness to the tissue, and it's bringing a connection to your body. So you're feeling the tissue, you sort of rehydrate and remodel some of it. You're kicking off that process. And so take the pressure away. You're going to make big change. You're going to fix it all. It's just, these are the rules of engagement you have for this first step is I'm just going to get in there and I'm just going to feel my body. I'm not going to pressure it too much, but I'm just going to start to bring awareness back to the tissue and let my body start to connect with this. Then we start to work with pillar 2. The problem is, it's kind of misleading to label them as separate pillars because your fascia wraps around the muscle, but also in through the muscle. And so the tissue that becomes the Achilles tendon is inextricable. It just, imagine that your Achilles tendon is one set of like fibrous connective tissue, and then that branches off into a bunch of different small tissues that are wrapped around muscle fibers. So it's not like your Achilles tendon stops. It just starts to get interspersed in the calf. So that's the way you can think it's threaded through, so to speak. And so the thing about the muscles, though, is again, our muscles are our conscious connection to the body. They are how we move. I know we mentioned this earlier, but it should really hit you that this entire thing you have, the only way you can really interact with it is a conscious connection to muscles. And what a loss if you lose access to 30% of your muscles. I mean, we think this is obvious when we look at someone like has a stroke or Parkinson's or any of these neurodegenerative disorders where they literally lose access to half their body or parts of their body. But what we don't think about is we're kind of doing that. Dysfunctional movement is just another way of saying you don't have access to your movement. What if you couldn't say words that started with R, or you couldn't feel emotions that had to do with anger? Like you just think about how lopsided your experience would be. And so when we give up muscles, it's just say, "Oh, I got a weak tricep," or even worse, we tear muscles. It's such a strange. I don't know. That's something I'm thinking of. I don't know what to do with that yet. But like, there's a loss of connection. Of like, you can no longer experience a part of life, and that's very interesting. So working on things like dexterity, coordination, rotation, movements, all happens by our muscles. Our muscles push and pull, and so the value of the muscle is that's how we can stretch, because stretching is really using leverage and gravity to pull into position. So you don't have to it doesn't have to be muscularly engaged effort to stretch, meaning I can just put my forefoot up on something and then just drop my body weight down, and then the fascia will stretch. I can massage and just press in, and that's actually a release. I let go. But when it comes to the muscle, this is the embodied experience of what it means to be a human. We have to actively feel our body and actively connect. And so it's the same thing with like a slow lower. It's like you're really a slow eccentric phase. You're lowering down into something. You're really connecting and pulling into. You're feeling your body. You're becoming like, I have set an intention. I'm going to find tension. So bodybuilding in its what it's meant to be is a form where you're actively feeling your body and connecting with this experience of living. Like you're feeling and connecting. Can I feel my biceps move? And so you look at dancers and athletes and gymnasts who have such good connection to the muscles. It's their practice. And so that's not off limits to humans. That's the base level of just being alive and having some type of connection to your body. So just keep that in mind as you do this, because the pillar about muscles is about how we intentionally bring awareness back to it. So, a lot of people, one note on this, the misconception is people would think, well, I got Achilles tendonitis for most people because I walk too much, or I walk and I'm getting 10,000, 20,000 steps. I hike, or I run, or I jump, or I play basketball, or soccer. And I think I'm on my feet for 10, 20, 30,000 steps a day. How could they possibly be weak? But the reality is, when you have shoes that have a stiff sole and thickly padded cushions and a curved sole so that rocks for you, compared with the fact that our body is really good at making very passive movements second nature, meaning walking, swinging, throwing, running. Like they're not passive, but they're like repetitive rhythmic movements that we kind of need for locomotion. We don't want to think about that. I want to be able to go and hunt while I walk. I want to have a conversation. But if I have to think step, 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 steps, I'm not going to get anywhere. So our body has an amazing capacity to handle those things on its own using things like passive tissue. So if we're not careful, wearing shoes that kind of outsource the movement of our feet, we can end up where we have just stiffness. We're relying on the connective tissue, the bones, the tendon, not so much the tendons, but the connective tissue in the bones, and to a degree the tendons, to move for us. And then we outsource out the shoes that roll through. So if someone's wearing Hoka's that have a curved rocker sole and 2 inches of padding, they're going to go, I don't care if you get 20,000 steps a day. There's a reason your knees and your back and your hips and your hamstrings all feel stiff at the end of the day, because you're not moving with intention, you're not actively using the muscles. And you can imagine that over years and years of this, guess what? You get stiff, and then ultimately you turn into calves that are sticks and feet that are flippers. And then, wow, I can't believe I have Achilles tendonitis. I can. So, think about that. So, what this looks like, a lot of calf raises. And what you realize is, just like there's a lot of ways to grip things with the hands, there's a lot of ways to put pressure through your feet. Calf raises with your knees straight, kind of prioritizes the gastrocnemius. Calf raises with the knees at a slight bent angle. It's kind of a hybrid of both. Calf raises with the knees fully bent. You do it with seated calf raises. You can do it in a hip bridge. There's a lot of variations you can do with that. You can just like drive the knees forward. That's more for the soleus, so to speak. Calf raises with the feet turned in is going to work on more of the plantaris and fibularis muscles on the outside. Calf raises with the feet turned out. It's going to work more on the medial gastric, some of that pos tib and the flexor hallucis longus. Calf raises with the rolling across the balls of the feet, moving laterally. So that's your transverse arch, which is up at the front of the balls of your feet. is your arch pronation, just going across and working on the ankle rotation. Doing all of these while you're pushing through the toes actively. So if you're barefoot, you realize that the muscles in your feet are just like the muscles in your fingertips. If I want to push away, but like, pushing my wrist away, that's good. But if I can really, if you're throwing a football, one of the things that they'll say is like you push all the way through with your fingers. So you throw a ball, you're driving, I'm throwing, I'm snapping the wrist, but I'm also pushing my fingers. No different. If you want that full connection, you push through the toes and you feel them, you distinguish them as different things. But it's not just calf raises. And we'll come back to the reps and all that stuff, how the technical cues in a second. It also looks like tib raises because you have to strengthen the front. For example, if I flex my wrist, I'm stretching the tissue on the outside of my forearm. If I flex my calf, I'm shortening, or if I flex my calf, the calf's a little weird because they're a different type of lever, but if I flex my calf, I'm technically in some capacity lengthening the tissue on the front side. So if I pull my tibialis to the front, I'm stretching out the calf. So by pulling the toes up, I'm lengthening the calf to some extent. Tib raises, you can't. And the other thing is that there's like, I don't know, there's one, I don't know, there's like 12 or more muscles of the lower leg, I think. Your soleus, gastroc, your plantaris, your pos tib, your flexor hallucis longus, digitorum longus. I don't know. There's like 8, so whatever. 8, there's more than one muscle in your lower leg, and they all need movement. And so if you don't just continue to get rotation and all these pieces together, you're not going to hit it all. So tib raises with the foot and ankle rotating. So lateral, so tib turn. So you lift your foot up, you rotate, put the outside of your foot down. That's what we did at the beginning. Tib raises with the toes relaxed while lifting the inside of the foot upwards. That's going to be tib. So you were lifting in and pulling up. So that's your posterior tibialis. So you're pulling and lifting the inside of the bottom of your foot up. So you're turning your feet in. So there's different ways you do this. All involve rotation, but you're pulling up. Then you start to move up. So don't forget that your posterior chain, which is all the tissue in the back of your leg, is connected. So some type of hamstring curl that puts load on the leg with the leg is fully straightened. This could be like a straight leg deadlift with the arched back, and you're really lengthening the back of that leg, and you're just doing that bottom portion, or a hamstring machine. So basically what you're thinking about is you're working that bottom few inches of degree where the leg's fully extended, and then you're flexing into like just 5-10 degrees of motion, and you're straightening it and fully stretching it. So that's pulling all of the tissue open. Same thing on the opposite end for the short range. Some type of hamstring that puts load in the leg with the knee fully bent. So the hamstring is fully contracted, pulling all the way in. Could be a physio ball hamstring curl or a hamstring machine. This is a whole different topic, but most people have a bad association with the gym because they think it's just they think it's an expense. They can just do it at home, or they think it's where a bunch of meatheads go, and it has been co-opted by a bunch of losers. But what you want to think about is it's a beautiful place with machines that you can actively work on isolation and feel your body again. Specifically with the hamstring, I think I've had tremendous progress in my body in various regards, just spending time in a hamstring machine in both of these, because it's, sometimes it's hard to load these things in that capacity when you're coming back. So we'll talk about that's a different conversation. Then you want to flip over to the front. So the quadriceps, the front of the knee, because again, if you think about the tissue that runs around your knee, incorporates your kneecap and goes down through your tibialis to the front of your foot, the left front of your foot, and that creates some of the rotation at the ankle, guess what? That's inextricably linked to the calf or the quad. And the extension of pushing your toes away, pushing your ankle away, and pushing your knee away, that happens as your glutes, your quads, your calves, and your feet extend. So the quadruple extension. So Patrick step, which is basically your foot's flat on the ground and your hips are extended. So there's only a slight bend in the knee as you lean back and you reach the other foot forward. That's going to load the ankle with the knee in a partial short range of motion. So it's going to work on ankle dorsiflexion under load. The Peterson step is the same thing, but the heel is lifted. So you're actively extending the ankle, but you're loading the knee in the short range of motion. And again, a full long range of motion to stretch, which is going to pull on the Achilles and this calf and with the ankle bent. A reverse slant forward squat. Basically, the forefoot is elevated and you're squatting down. You're really spreading those toes out and driving the knees forward. Hold on to something if you need. A unilateral option with a deep split squat where you're driving the knee forward up on the toes. It's just taking some of the weight off. You can hold on something there as well. So again, hamstrings and quadriceps, short and long range. And then last one is the adductor. So squeezing a ball between the thighs engages the adductors, literally just like trying to crush something like a watermelon between your thighs. I also think that this is an incredibly valuable thing to work in combination with stuff like hamstrings. You'll notice that, and this is internal and external torque. That would be another topic for a seminar, but your knee doesn't work in flexion extension primarily. I mean, it does, but it's really rotation. When we look at like active movements, like jumping, throwing, sprinting, it's a rotation. So when we drive in, like if I punch in, the whole body I'm pushing and pronating across, the arch is collapsing, I'm going through the big toe, knees coming in, hips rotating inward as my glute extends, there's a rotation. Same thing with a punch. The elbow is rotating in internal torque and external torque because I punch and pull. Same thing with that. And so by working and using the adductors, integrating them into these movements like hip extension or knee flexion to a degree, but mostly hip extension, you're going to get a more ingrained aspect of understanding those pieces. So that's really valuable for short range adductor work. And then long range, you can do adductor side planks and stuff like that, or for other short range thing. Basically, you do a side plank, but you lift the bottom leg off, and so the top leg is supporting and it's pressing down on the knee inward. And then long range is just, standing split good mornings where your feet are really wide and you're just lowering down to touch the ground, or walking out to a push-up position. Basically, it's just short and long, you're pushing and pulling. Now, obviously, you can continue you want to focus on the hip flexors, you want to focus on the glutes, you'd want to focus on the core and the psoas and start to work up through your shoulders and rotation. But you start to see how rehabilitation starts with a focus on the pain point, but it slowly incorporates everything because there's no part of the body that's separate from anything else. So, the rehabilitation is just a time you set rules around specific parts and you work with that, but you then incorporate them into bigger aspects and you start to develop. This is what I mean by space, is you start to say, my feet are actually capable enough for me to go and do something like a squat. Okay, my feet are actually capable to do something like a jump, or you move up from there. So just keep that in mind. One point on this is that the sets and reps do not matter. And so remember, this is part of the rehab games. You're going to think, wait, but how am I going to know if I'm doing it right? That's your brain. You got to trust that your body can be there. So ultimately, you want to focus on the muscle tension. You pick an exercise and you move with the breath. In and out. All you're focused on is breathing consistently. In and out, in and out. That means you never stop breathing. If you hold your breath, it means you're disconnected with the movement. You're now thinking in your head about what you're doing and you're not breathing. So by focusing on the breathing, you're just going to then allow the body to move and to work. Now, the breathing doesn't have to be synced with the movement either. All you're focused on is not holding your breath, and you're searching for the muscle burn, the muscle tension. You're feeling that, and once you find that, you stay there, and you stay there for as long as you want. Like, you are really maximizing that. But I will say, once the burn starts, that's when the working reps are really getting there. So if you don't feel a burn or you don't feel a muscle connection, you're not there. And so you might need to add more points of contact. There's points of stability, I mean, holding on to things, taking the weight off. You might have to regress. You might have to find a different move. You will have to get creative to start to feel these things, especially if you haven't connected with them in the last few decades. So really take the time that the point is not the sets and reps. They do not matter. I do not care how much it is. One last point of this is that the goal is to use your intuition. We have been taught for as long as we've been alive, especially when we started to go to socialized school, that you can't trust yourself. The teacher will tell you what to do. Your parent will tell you what to do. And to a degree, that's valuable because we do have to learn how to act in a social environment in a complex society. But you will never give back. It's okay to reference somebody, get reassurance, but if you have to look to your physical therapist and say, is this okay? Is this too many reps? Is this a good exercise? Should I be? I understand deeply the hesitation, the concern, and I understand what you're not trying to play that, but just understand that the thing that is asking that is not your body. It is your mind. It is the rehab games. And the person who's got their job dependency, they're trying to pay off their student debt or their bins or whatever they have, they're going to sit there. Yep, I will sit here and count the reps for you. It's like we play these roles. And so if the ultimate goal is to learn to trust your body, you have to then learn to trust your intuition. Ooh, that feels good. This feels like a muscle burn. Okay, that feels like enough. If I'm sore or tired, then I take a day off or I just move very lightly. If I feel good, I try something harder. If I'm feeling really good and move forward, it's good. If you bump into pain, that's okay. You don't freak out. You just remember, because pain isn't a signal that something is wrong. It's just a sign to slow down. It's a yellow light. Remember, pain is a yellow light. And you will learn that pain is the thing you look for. I'm going to keep moving until I got a little pain there. Okay, good. That means that I'm now bumping up the edges of my capacity. So now I'm going to add points of contact, more grip, more hold on to something, take the weight off. I'm going to slow the movement down. And then I ease into that. And then I slowly start to just develop this. It's again, the constant thing is I notice pain, my body comes in, because your brain is like a dictator. It's going to come and say, oh, that was pain. That was bad. I told you shouldn't have done that extra rep, you stupid person. And it's going to talk down about your body. And it's going to go, we're going to go talk to our physical therapist, our chiropractor, our massage therapist, our orthopedic surgeon, whatever it is. I'm going to go talk to them, my personal trainer. and they're going to tell us that you are wrong, and they're going to go ask. It's always an outsourcing. And I'm not saying that you can't use these professionals in a good way. Obviously, they are there to educate and to remind you and really to reassure you. The biggest thing I do is reassure people. You're okay. It's going well. Just remember, the ultimate goal is to trust yourself, be one with your body, and develop an intuition. So that happens by taking those small steps. Find the sensation, search for the muscle tension, and develop that connection with your body. And as you do that, the way you will tell that you're getting better is you'll start to feel confident. That doesn't mean you want to immediately feel fear or uncertainty right after that confidence, but it'll be the way you know you were healing is when you start to forget that you're doing stuff. Meaning, when your back hurts, I used to have these back issues all the time, and occasionally just something still pops up. But you feel like, oh, I can't bend over. That's bad. And so you get real hesitant. You do your little lift as wedge. You get down there. And the way you know you're healing better is you actually forgot to think about it. You just bent over and oh, wow, I just bent over and picked that up and didn't even think about it. That's how you know. That's the confidence of your body. But that has nothing to do. The noticing of it is an after effect of the thing happening. If you're being the judge watching tennis and the ball gets hit in, you just, the ball went in. Oh, the ball went out. But it's not saying, I hope the ball goes in. I hope my back doesn't hurt. I hope the hopes, the what if, the anxieties, that's here. Trusting your body is just, that happened. This. And then when you really are you flow with it. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to use that feedback. I'll adjust this. And it's like, that's okay. That's connected. That's a healthy mind and body together. Last pillar. And this is a lot shorter. I promise. We're almost done. Plyometrics. Mostly because by the time I got here after hours of writing and putting this together, I was like, okay, there's too much in this. Plyometrics are the rapid rhythmic movements that coordinate fascia. So remember, you've moved and stretched and remodeled and opened up fascia. Now you have to condition it. Just like leather, you have to beat it down. You have to beat it into submission, so to speak, but not like that. But like you have to beat and roll and move and work and condition. And that's the hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of reps that are walking and hopping and skipping and dancing and rolling and crawling and carrying and swinging and hanging and throwing and jumping and falling and skipping, like all and bounding and all these things. Like that is the movement of life that conditions you over and over and over and over and over again. Plyometrics are how we do that. And the way you do it is you start small and you build up. Now, the thing I'll say is that plyometrics work like I could probably do a whole seminar on this, but plyometrics are like a light switch, on or off. You either are sub-threshold and you haven't done enough to stretch over that capacity to make change, or you have. And so muscle is like a dimmer switch. You can work a muscle at 20%, 40%, 60%, and kind of feel a little bit of different engagement, maybe a little bit of soreness, but almost all soreness actually comes from fascial tearing and fascial connection and fascial remodeling. So when you actually train, you remodel the fascia by an eccentric, a low eccentric, or you're doing plyometrics and you feel it, you're going to feel sore for days. So when you jump in, when you start to work on this connective tissue, that's when you start to have, you might do some of that with muscle, especially if you're stiff and you're getting a real deep connection, you're really pulling, you're really kind of getting the muscle to swell and it's tearing some of the fascial encasement. You'll get some soreness there. But the real soreness is when you go out and like people, they go run barefoot with me, like I'll do some strides. If I go a month or a few weeks without running barefoot, like sprinting, because of whatever reason, you get back into it, you can be sore for days, if not a week. And so it takes a while to really do that. But when the fascia remodels, it sticks. And so your goal is to slowly work to just hit that threshold and bounce back off. And so it's tough because there is no good way of saying it because this is one where, the hard part is the leverages you put on these things because it's quicker. You're more explosive movement. You're starting to build up on that. It's a little bit, you have to err on the side of just being a little bit more, all right, if I'm coming back from this, let me just ease into it. So my rule of thumb is stop where you feel good. Stop, save that last rep, save that last set. With muscle, you can really push in and go to failure. With plyometrics and jumping, I don't necessarily think that that's off limits, but I think you have to earn that. And there's an intuitive feel for your body, like, yep, I feel like that's worked. And generally, you'll be able to tell when you stop breathing fluidly. So when you're jumping and you're holding your breath or you get out of breath, it means your heart rate's I would have to do a whole different thing on this, but like heart rate is related to your psychological experience of fear. When you feel uncertain, you're scared, that's when your heart rate jumps up because the acidity in your blood is getting higher. It's not about am I out of shape? Yes, there is an out of shape, but there's parallel processes. But in large part, when you're doing something that isn't going to be taxing, you're just afraid. And I don't mean that in like a pejorative way. I mean literally, like your body's uncertain about what's going to happen, and your mind's, fluttering with a lot of ideas, and so you're disconnected, and you have a hard time paying attention to what you're doing. So the secret with plyometrics, you start small and you scale up. You do things that you know you can't get hurt. So bounding on the ground with bouncing without leaving the ground. Very simple. Just like a faster calf raise. Singing like bouncing on the ground. Jump rope hopping. And so you will feel like, okay, I think I could do that. I'm a little scared. That's okay. But it's like the fact you're thinking there, and you could try a few things. You can kind of start off, I'm going to start bouncing on the ground. Maybe after 20 or 30, I kind of leave the ground. So, okay, all right, now I can do that. That's good. And then you start to develop confidence. And the point is, I don't care if this takes you 3 days or 3 years. You'll care. But the point is that you're moving along. And the point is, your body will progress. But ultimately, it's not necessary. The point is not to do specific actions. It's just to be trusting and have your body, to trust your body, to have a path of working and get there. So, it's a hard balance between, getting stuck in the rehab games of like, well, I could do this. I did 10% last time, so I'm going to do 11% this time. That can kind of work, but you got to let go of that eventually. And so this is why, I've learned when it comes to this phase, you have to trust life. And by that, I mean, you allow, ironically, like when I've had issues like, dislocations or subluxation, ankle sprain, or like torn calves and stuff like that, oftentimes you try to control, like, oh, I'm not gonna do this, I'm only gonna do this, but then you realize that you slip and you fall. Like, oh wow, okay, my ankle held up for that. That's really cool. Or somebody, you get scared, you get jerked, and like my shoulder throws up. Like, oh, okay. It's like life just kind of does this stuff for you. If you're out living life, you're not like so protected and you're stuck in this little world where you're trying to isolate from everything. Like if you are involved in social life, with sports, with movement, with exercise, things are going to happen. And I think that's part of learning to trust your body, is that I can go out and I can play a sport. I can go out and I can run. I don't have to be in a treadmill inside a gym and air conditioned with perfect, weather, perfect lighting. It's like, I can go out and my body can handle it. And so the progression of the plyometrics is learning to really return to play. And that is ultimately allowing the variables of life to drive and push you into certain areas that you might not have done consciously. But once you do that, you have evidence to say, I don't have to be afraid of that. I could try that. And so then you can continue to work up this thing. So this is a generalized pathway you could think about, like, jump rope hopping, skipping, backpedaling, single leg bounding, rebound hops, which are you jump up, you bounce off the ground, hop back up, repeated broad jumps, bounding, sprinting. Yeah, those are all things you can sort of work on as like a cognitive rule set and guideline. But in general, if you're not, a truly healthy integration of your body is a mind and body that's fit into a society, into a greater purpose that has a point. What's the point of your life? And if you don't have a point to your life, that's when people obsess over injury. But when you have a point to your life, you got stuff to get back to. You got kids to handle. You got work to do. You got a spouse. You got life to do. And that life will throw you enough pieces that will force you to start to get over your fears and get back into it. And that's true healing. And that doesn't mean that you got halfway through this and you're like, oh, well, I slipped and fell and I was good. So no, you training is that you notice how this list goes from rehabilitation to full all performance pretty directly. Training and rehabilitation is not a separate part of life. It's a time you used to pause and you reconnect with the fact that, you know what? Something happened. I wasn't trusting myself. There's an emotional experience, a psychology thing. Something got in that messed up my mind and body, and I'm no longer in the same smooth, integrated sense of who I was. I got injured. I have pain, whatever. This is a wake-up call to go and really reconnect with that. And now that I'm in this, I want to stay in this funnel and continue to push myself and see what I can do, because there is no difference between pushing your physical performance, your mental performance, your emotional expression, your psychological capacity, and your individual capacity as a unique human with a point. So think about that. This is just the start to get back into it. But if you don't have a point where you continue to work and meaning that gets you out back into the game, you're never going to get there. So that's why, Achilles Tendonitis. But you have resources. I have a program. You can start one off with the Athletic Foundation. It can help because I know a lot of these things are there. I have the exercises, and I'll probably make a better job of putting some videos on this as well. In like a written PDF form that'll be available in the Barefoot community. So Athletic Foundation is a proven path, it's a step to do that. It's really that focus on the first pillar, which is remodeling the fascia and reconnecting with your body. Unbreakable Academy includes that as part of the greater thing, which is, several months, about 6 different programs I'll work you through, from the very stiff pain points to full capacity. Those are there. They're somewhere associated with something with this. If you haven't already started that, then just know you have resources